The massive chamber fell silent as the final vote was counted. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone in the center of the circular room, surrounded by hundreds of alien faces. Some looked satisfied, others seemed worried, but most just looked relieved that the decision was finally made. The prime speaker of the Althari Dominion rose from his floating platform. His pale blue skin seemed to glow under the chamber lights as he spread his forearms wide. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the translation devices that every species wore. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," he announced. "The species known as humans have repeatedly refused to follow our laws. They will not give up their weapons. They will not stop their aggressive expansion. They will not submit to proper council oversight." Sarah kept her face calm, but inside her heart was racing. She had known this moment would come. For months, the council had been pushing Earth harder and harder. They wanted humanity to give up their military technology. They wanted Earth to stop building new colonies. Most of all, they wanted humans to act more like the other species in the galaxy. The problem was that humans were different. They always had been. Therefore, the Prime Speaker continued, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All trade agreements are cancelled. All technological exchanges are ended. All humans must leave Council space within 30 standard days. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the alien delegates looked uncomfortable. The Zentari representative, a tall insect-like being, shifted nervously in his seat. The Makari delegate, who looked almost human except for her silver skin, avoided Sarah's eyes. Sarah stepped forward. The guards tensed, their weapons ready, but she only raised her hand to speak. "May I address the council one final time?" she asked. The Prime Speaker looked annoyed but nodded. "You have 2 minutes." Sarah looked around the chamber slowly. She had spent 5 years here, trying to make peace between Earth and the other species. She had made friends among some of the delegates. She had even convinced a few that humans were not the monsters the Althari claimed they were. 500 years ago, she began, the Althari found us. We were still fighting wars on our home planet. We were still learning how to travel between stars. You offered us membership in this council, and we accepted gratefully. The chamber was completely quiet now. Even the Prime Speaker was listening. We learned your languages. We followed your laws. We traded with your merchants and shared our discoveries with your scientists. But there was one thing we would not do. We would not give up who we are. Sarah's voice grew stronger. You call us aggressive because we keep our military strong. But we use that strength to protect others, not to conquer them. You call us difficult because we ask questions. But questions lead to better answers. You call us dangerous because we explore new worlds. But exploration brings new knowledge to everyone. Some of the delegates were nodding now. The Mokari representative was looking directly at Sarah, and her expression was sad. We offered to share our military technology with all species, not just the council leadership. We offered to help explore the dark regions of space that you have ignored for centuries. We offered to work together as equals, but that is not what you wanted. The Prime Speaker's skin was turning a darker blue, which Sarah knew meant anger. Your time is up, he said coldly, but Sarah was not finished. You want us gone because you are afraid. You are afraid that other species will see what we have built and want the same thing. You are afraid that they will start asking why they must follow rules they had no part in making. You are afraid that your perfect order will fall apart. Now the chamber erupted in noise. Some aliens were shouting in agreement. Others were calling for Sarah to be arrested. The Prime Speaker was pounding his gavel, trying to restore order. Sarah raised her voice above the chaos. You want us gone? Fine, we will go. But remember this day when your perfect galaxy starts to crack. Remember that you had a chance to work with us and you chose fear instead. The guards moved forward, but Sarah held up her hands. I am leaving, she said. She turned and walked toward the exit, her back straight and her head high. As she reached the door, she stopped and looked back one more time. You will see us again, she said quietly. But not as the weak species you remember. When we return, it will be as something you never expected. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. 3 hours later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the human transport ship Determination. Captain Rodriguez, a stern woman with graying hair, was coordinating the evacuation of all human personnel from Council space. How many ships do we have? Sarah asked. 47 transport vessels and 12 escort ships, Rodriguez replied. Not exactly a grand fleet. Sarah looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, their homeworld. But Earth was in Council space and humans were no longer welcome there. What about the outer colonies? Sarah asked. Most of them are beyond the official borders, Rodriguez said. The Council never bothered to claim those regions. Too far away. Too dangerous, not enough resources to bother with. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Perfect. Admiral Marcus Torres appeared on the communication screen. He was commanding the escort ships from his flagship, the Defiance. Torres was older than Sarah, with silver hair and scars from the last war Earth had fought before joining the Council. Ambassador, he said formally, we are ready to depart Council space. What are our orders? Sarah thought about the Prime Speaker's smug expression. She thought about all the times the Council had told humanity to be less human. She thought about the fear in some of the delegates' eyes when they voted to banish Earth. Admiral, she said slowly, take us to the edge of known space. Take us to where no Council ship has ever gone. Take us home, Torres grinned. It was not a nice expression. With pleasure, Ambassador. The human fleet turned away from the galaxy's center and headed into the darkness. Behind them, the Council delegates were already congratulating themselves on solving the human problem. They had no idea what they had just done. As the last human ship disappeared into the void, Admiral Torres sent a final message back to the Council. It was simple and direct, the way humans liked their communications. You wanted us gone. Consider your wish granted. You will not see us again until we are ready. The message reached the Council chambers just as the delegates were voting on how to divide up the former human territories. The Prime Speaker read it aloud and then deleted it with a dismissive gesture. Empty words from a defeated species, he announced. Within 50 years they will either be extinct or begging us to take them back. The other delegates laughed and nodded. After all, no species had ever survived banishment to the outer darkness. The Council had used this punishment before, and it always worked the same way. First came desperation, then came slow decline, finally came extinction. But as the human ships flew deeper into unknown space, Sarah Chen was not thinking about extinction. She was thinking about possibilities. She was thinking about all the species that had been banished before humanity. She was thinking about what could be built in the darkness away from the Council's watching eyes. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humans. They were at their most dangerous when someone told them they could not do something. 25 years had passed since the last human ship left Council space. The alien governments called this period the Long Dark, because that was what always happened to banished species. They disappeared into the void and were never heard from again. The Council had moved on. The former human territories were divided among the loyal species. New laws were passed to prevent future problems. The Prime Speaker gave speeches about the wisdom of removing troublesome elements from civilized society. But in the vast darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, something very different was happening. Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked the readings one more time. The experimental drive core hummed quietly in front of her, its blue glow casting strange shadows on the walls of the research station. Are you sure about this? Asked her assistant, Dr. Kim. If the calculations are wrong, we could tear a hole in space itself. Elena smiled. That is exactly what we are trying to do. Just a very controlled hole. The research station orbited a small planet in what humans had named the Haven system. It was the first world they had found after leaving Council space, and it had become the center of human civilization in exile. The planet below was covered with cities and factories all built in the past 25 years. Elena activated the drive core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to twist and bend around the device. A tunnel of swirling energy appeared, leading somewhere far away. It works, Dr. Kim whispered. We can travel faster than light without using the Council's jump gates. Elena nodded, but she was already thinking about improvements. This was just the beginning. The Council had cut humanity off from their technology, but they had also freed humans to innovate in ways they never could before. On the other side of the Haven system, Captain Jake Morrison was running a very different kind of experiment. His ship, the Pioneer, hung in space surrounded by a dozen smaller vessels. Each ship was crewed by volunteers from different human colonies. Begin Exercise 7, Morrison announced over the communication system. Remember, the goal is not to follow orders. The goal is to think. The small fleet scattered in all directions. To an outside observer, it would have looked like chaos. But Morrison watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Each ship captain was making their own decisions, adapting to changing conditions, working together without being told exactly what to do. This was the new human military doctrine. Not the rigid formations that other species used, but flexible groups that could change and adapt faster than any enemy could respond. Morrison's communication officer interrupted his thoughts. Sir, we are getting a signal from long-range sensors. Unknown ship approaching the system. Morrison frowned. Council ship? No, sir. The design is completely different. and they are broadcasting a message. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Morrison had ever heard. It sounded like rocks grinding together, but the translation software managed to convert it into words. Human ships, please do not fire. We mean no harm. We are like you. We were banished from the galaxy long ago. Morrison and his crew exchanged glances. They had always wondered if Earth was the first species to be exiled by the Council. Apparently not. This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Pioneer. Identify yourself. I am Stone Speaker Thrak of the Vorthak people. We have been in exile for 150 of your years. We saw your ships arrive in this region and have been watching you. We would like to talk. 2 days later, Stone Speaker Thrak stood in the main conference room of Haven Station. He was roughly humanoid in shape, but seemed to be made entirely of living crystal. When he moved, his body reflected light in beautiful patterns. Across from him sat Ambassador Sarah Chen, now graying but still sharp. Admiral Torres was there too, along with Dr. Vasquez and Captain Morrison. It was the first diplomatic meeting between humans and aliens since the exile. Your people build quickly, Thrak said, his voice still sounding like grinding stone despite the translators. When we first arrived in this region, it took us 50 years to establish a single colony. Sarah leaned forward. How many colonies do you have now? 7 worlds with perhaps 10 million of our people. We were a much larger species before the Council decided we were too dangerous to remain in civilized space. What was your crime? Admiral Torres asked. Thrak's crystal body shifted, creating new patterns of light. We could manipulate energy in ways the Council found disturbing. We could power entire cities with devices no larger than your hand. We could create weapons that drew energy from stars themselves. The Council said such technology was too dangerous for any one species to possess. Dr. Vasquez sat up straighter. You can manipulate energy directly, without machines? It is our natural ability, but we lost much knowledge during our exile. We had to rebuild everything from nothing. Sarah saw an opportunity. What if we helped each other? Humans are good at building and organizing. Your people understand energy in ways we never could. Together we might accomplish more than either of us could alone. Thrak was quiet for a long moment. The Council taught us not to trust other species. They said cooperation between different peoples always leads to war. The Council says many things, Torres said grimly. Most of them are lies designed to keep everyone weak and divided. Over the following months, human and Vorthak engineers worked together on Haven Station. The results were incredible. Human manufacturing techniques combined with Vorthak energy manipulation created technologies that neither species could have, developed alone. Ships that could travel faster and farther than anything in Council space. Weapons that could disable enemy vessels without destroying them. Most importantly, communication devices that could reach across vast distances instantly. These new communicators brought more surprises. As human explorers pushed deeper into the outer regions, they discovered that the Vorthak were not the only exiled species. The Klaxi, insect-like beings who had been banished for their rapid reproduction, had built a network of hidden colonies. The Moktan, who looked like living metal, had been exiled for refusing to share their technology with the Council. Each species had the same story. They had been different, so they had been cast out. They had been told to submit to Council rule, and when they refused, they were banished to the darkness. Sarah Chen found herself in a position she had never expected. She was no longer just a human ambassador. She was becoming the leader of an alliance of outcasts. The meeting took place on a neutral space station that the Klaxi had built in the void between stars. Representatives from 6 different species gathered around a circular table. Each had been exiled by the Council for different reasons, but they all shared the same desire for freedom. The question, Sarah said, is what we do now. We could remain hidden forever, building our own small civilizations in the darkness, or we could work together to build something bigger. The Klaxi representative, a being called Swiftclaw, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The Council believes we are extinct. That gives us an advantage they do not expect. The Moktan delegate, who called herself Silvermind, spoke in her electronic voice. My people have been developing new technologies for 3 centuries. Combined with human innovation and Vorthak energy manipulation, we could build fleets that would surprise the Council. Stone Speaker Thrak's crystal body flashed with agreement. The Council grows weak. They have not faced a real challenge in 1,000 years. They believe their own propaganda about the superiority of their system. Sarah looked around the table. Are we talking about war? We are talking about freedom, Torres said firmly. The Council will never leave us alone. Sooner or later they will come for us. When they do, we need to be ready. Not just ready, Swiftclaw added. We need to be strong enough that they can never exile another species again. The vote was unanimous. The Rim Alliance was born that day, uniting 6 species under a simple charter. Each member would keep their own culture and government, but they would share technology and defend each other against outside threats. What the Council had intended as punishment had become something they never expected. The exiled species were not dying in the darkness. They were growing stronger. And in the hidden shipyards orbiting dead worlds, construction began on a fleet that would one day shock the galaxy. Commander Zeal for Truth nervously checked his instruments as his patrol ship entered the outer edge of what used to be called the Dead Zone. The Althari officer had been ordered to investigate strange energy readings that Council sensors had detected in this region. It was the first time in 50 years that any Council ship had ventured this far from civilized space. "Are you sure these readings are accurate?" asked his second-in-command, a young officer named Hope for Peace. Zeal for Truth looked at the data again. The sensors show massive energy signatures, industrial activity on a scale that should not be possible in this empty region. Their ship, the Righteous Purpose, was a standard Council patrol vessel. It carried enough firepower to subdue a rebellious planet and sensors that could detect ships from several star systems away. Zeal for Truth had served on the Council borders for 30 years, and he had never seen readings like these. "Commander," the sensor operator called out suddenly, "I am detecting artificial structures ahead. Multiple orbital platforms around what appears to be a heavily populated star system." Zeal for Truth moved to the main viewer. What he saw made his blue skin turn pale. The star system ahead was filled with activity. Massive space stations hung in orbit around several planets. Ships moved between them in organized patterns. Most shocking of all, the ships were designs he had never seen before. They were sleek and powerful, built with technology that looked more advanced than anything in Council space. "This is impossible," Hope for Peace whispered. "This region has been empty for centuries." "Apparently not," Zeal for Truth replied grimly. "Begin recording everything. The Council needs to know about this immediately." As they moved closer, more details became visible. The planets below were covered with cities. The space stations were enormous, some larger than entire Council worlds. And everywhere they looked, there were ships. Hundreds of them, all following efficient traffic patterns that spoke of a highly organized civilization. "Commander," the communications officer announced, "we are being scanned. Multiple sources, very sophisticated sensors." Before Zeal for Truth could respond, a new ship appeared on their screens. It was moving toward them at incredible speed, far faster than any Council vessel could travel. As it came closer, they could see it was unlike anything in their databases. The ship was beautiful in a deadly way. Its hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, and energy patterns danced across its surface. It was clearly built for war, but it was also a work of art. "Unknown vessel," a voice came through their communication system speaking perfect Althari. "You are in Alliance space. Please state your business here." Zeal for Truth tried to keep his voice steady. "This is Commander Zeal for Truth of the Galactic Council patrol ship Righteous Purpose. We are conducting a routine survey of this region." There was a pause. Then the voice came back, and this time it sounded amused. "Commander, you are about 50 years too late for routine surveys. This is Admiral Chen of the Alliance Defense Force. I suggest you turn around and head back to Council space before this becomes complicated." Chen. Zeal for Truth knew that name from the historical records. Sarah Chen had been the human ambassador who was banished along with her entire species decades ago, but humans were supposed to be extinct by now. "Admiral Chen," he said carefully, "the Council records show that your species was declared extinct after failing to survive exile." Now the voice definitely sounded amused. "The Council records are incorrect about many things. Would you like me to prove we are still alive by disabling your ship?" More ships were appearing now, surrounding the Council patrol vessel. Zeal for Truth counted at least 20 vessels, all of different designs but clearly working together. His ship's weapons were completely outmatched. "Admiral, we mean no harm. We are simply gathering information." "I understand. And I'm going to let you gather some very important information to take back to the Council. Follow my ship and do not deviate from the course I give you. Any attempt to scan our military installations will result in your immediate destruction." For the next 6 hours, Admiral Chen's ship led the Righteous Purpose on a tour that changed everything Zeal for Truth thought he knew about the galaxy. They visited 3 star systems, each more impressive than the last. The first system contained the largest shipyard Zeal for Truth had ever seen. Ships were being built in massive construction bays, using techniques that seemed decades ahead of Council technology. The second system was clearly a major population center. Multiple worlds teemed with life, their surfaces covered with cities that gleamed like jewels. Space elevators reached up from the planets to orbital stations where millions of beings lived and worked. But it was the third system that truly shocked the Council officers. The planets here were clearly former wastelands, dead worlds that had been transformed into garden paradises. Advanced terraforming technology had created breathable atmospheres and flowing water where none had existed before. "How many worlds do you control?" Zeal for Truth finally asked. "The Alliance currently includes 437 star systems," Admiral Chen replied casually. "We add new members regularly. Would you like to see our capital?" Without waiting for an answer, she led them to a system that defied belief. At its center was a world that had clearly once been nothing but rock and ice. Now it was covered with vast cities connected by gleaming transportation networks. Orbital rings surrounded the planet, providing homes for billions of beings. Most shocking of all were the beings themselves. As the Council ship passed close to one of the orbital stations, they could see through the transparent walls. Humans worked alongside crystalline Vorthak, insect-like Klaxi coordinated with metallic Moktan. Dozens of species that Zeal for Truth recognized as extinct were walking around, very much alive. "This is Earth," Admiral Chen announced, "our capital world, home to over 8 billion humans and another 12 billion beings from our allied species." "This is impossible," Hope for Peace said weakly. "These species are all supposed to be dead." "The Council has been misinformed about many things," Admiral Chen said. "We have spent the last 50 years building something new, something better than the rigid order the Council tried to impose on the galaxy." As they passed the planet, massive defense platforms became visible. These were not the simple weapon systems that protected Council worlds. These were technological marvels that seemed to bend space itself around them. "Admiral," Zeal for Truth said quietly, "what do you want from the Council?" "Nothing," Chen replied. "We want nothing from the Council at all. We have everything we need right here. The question is what the Council wants from us." "I do not understand." "Your government has spent 50 years telling your people that diversity is dangerous, that different species cannot work together, that only the Council's way of doing things can bring peace and prosperity. We are living proof that all of those things are lies." The patrol ship was escorted to the edge of Alliance space, where Admiral Chen's ship stopped. "Commander," she said, "I want you to deliver a message to the Prime Speaker and the rest of the Council leadership. Tell them that the species they banished did not die in the darkness. We thrived. We built something magnificent. And we did it without their permission or their help. What else should I tell them?" Zeal for Truth asked. "Tell them that we are not coming back as the weak refugees they remember. If we return to the galaxy, it will be as an empire that rivals their own. Tell them to think carefully about whether they want us as friends or enemies." The communication channel closed, and the Alliance ship disappeared into the void, leaving the Council patrol alone at the edge of known space. As the Righteous Purpose began its journey back to Council space, Zeal for Truth reviewed the recordings they had made. Every image showed the same thing: a thriving civilization built by species the Council had written off as failures. "Commander," Hope for Peace said quietly, "what do we tell the Council?" Zeal for Truth was quiet for a long moment. "We tell them the truth. We tell them that everything they thought they knew about the exiled species was wrong. We tell them that there is now a second power in the galaxy, one that might be stronger than we are. And then what happens?" Zeal for Truth looked out at the stars. "Then we find out whether the Council is wise enough to seek peace, or foolish enough to choose war." The journey back to Council space took 2 weeks. When they arrived, Zeal for Truth transmitted his report directly to the Prime Speaker's office. Within hours, emergency sessions were being called. The Council that had spent 50 years congratulating itself on removing the human problem now faced a crisis they had never imagined. In the hidden chambers where the Alliance leadership met, Admiral Chen received word that the Council ship had successfully delivered its message. She smiled as she thought about the panic that must be spreading through the Council chambers right now. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. The Prime Speaker's chamber had never been so crowded. Every major species in the Council had sent their highest representatives to hear Commander Zeal for Truth's report. The holographic displays showed images that many of the delegates refused to believe. "Impossible," declared the Zentari ambassador, his insect-like features twisted with disbelief. These humans were barely capable of interstellar travel when we banished them. They cannot have built an empire in 50 years. The Prime Speaker's skin had turned the dark blue that indicated extreme stress. The evidence is clear, Ambassador. Our patrol ship sensors do not lie. The exiled species have not only survived, they have prospered beyond our worst fears. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Perhaps our worst fears were the wrong thing to worry about. Every head turned to look at the speaker. It was Ambassador Silversong of the Mokari, one of the few species that had opposed the human banishment 50 years ago. Her silver skin seemed to glow as she stepped forward. Prime Speaker, she continued, what exactly did we expect would happen when we cast out the most innovative species we had ever encountered? The Prime Speaker's forearms gestured dismissively. We expected them to fade away like all the others. No banished species has ever survived more than a few decades. And yet, Silversong replied, the humans not only survived, they convinced all those supposedly extinct species to join them. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. The emergency communication system activated, showing the face of Admiral Swiftstrike, commander of the Council's Border Defense Forces. Prime Speaker, Swiftstrike said urgently, we have multiple reports of unknown ships attacking our outer colonies. The attackers are using technology we have never seen before. The chamber erupted in confused voices. The Prime Speaker raised his hands for silence. Show us the tactical reports. The holographic display changed to show a star map. Red indicators showed attacks on 3 different council worlds, all along the border with what was formerly empty space. As they watched, more red indicators appeared. The attacking forces are small but highly effective, Swiftstrike continued. They disable our defense platforms without destroying them, then land troops who secure government buildings and communication centers. No civilian casualties have been reported. What do they want? Demanded the Zentari ambassador. Swiftstrike looked grim. They are broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies. They offer the local populations a choice: remain under council rule or join something called the Alliance of Free Worlds. The Prime Speaker's skin turned almost black. And what are the populations choosing? Sir, Swiftstrike said quietly, most of them are choosing to join the Alliance. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates were shouting in a dozen different languages. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for negotiations. A few, like Silversong, simply looked sad. The Prime Speaker slammed his gavel repeatedly until order was restored. Admiral Swiftstrike, how many ships are we facing? The attacks appear to be coordinated, but each individual force is small. Perhaps 50 ships total across all 3 systems. However, their technology is significantly more advanced than ours. Our ships cannot match their speed or maneuverability. 50 ships. The Zentari ambassador was incredulous. We have thousands of vessels in our fleet. How can 50 primitive ships threaten the entire council? Before Swiftstrike could answer, a new alarm sounded. This one was different, more urgent. The chamber's main screen activated to show an incoming transmission request. Prime Speaker, the communications officer announced, we are receiving a message from the attacking forces. They are requesting to speak with the full council leadership. The Prime Speaker hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Put them through. The screen cleared to show a human face. It was a woman in her 70s with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of hardship. Many of the older delegates recognized her immediately. Greetings, Prime Speaker, Sarah Chen said calmly. I am Emperor Sarah Chen of the Alliance of Free Worlds. I believe we need to talk. The title hit the chamber like a physical blow. Emperor, not ambassador, not representative, but emperor. The banished human was now claiming to rule an empire. Sarah Chen, the Prime Speaker said slowly. You were declared dead 50 years ago. Sarah smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. The reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, as were the reports of humanity's extinction, the Vorthax extinction, the Klaxes extinction, and the deaths of a dozen other species you cast into the darkness. What do you want? The Prime Speaker demanded. I want justice. For 50 years you have told the galaxy that diversity is dangerous, that species who think differently must be controlled or eliminated, that only the Council's way can bring peace. Today that lie ends. On the tactical display, more red indicators were appearing. The Alliance attacks were spreading, moving deeper into Council space. We are not here to conquer your worlds, Sarah continued. We are here to give your people the same choice we are giving everyone, freedom or continued oppression. The Zentari ambassador stood up angrily. You call our civilization oppression? We have brought peace and order to the galaxy for 1,000 years. Sarah's expression hardened. You have brought conformity and stagnation. You have crushed innovation and punished creativity. You have created a galaxy where different thoughts are crimes and different ways of life are forbidden. Your people were dangerous, the Prime Speaker protested. Your military technology, your aggressive expansion, were used to protect others, not to conquer them. Sarah cut him off. But you could not allow that, could you? You could not allow a species to be strong without being under your control. The tactical display showed that Alliance forces had now attacked a dozen Council worlds. More concerning, preliminary reports indicated that most of the local populations were welcoming the attackers as liberators. What are your terms? Silversong asked quietly. Sarah looked at the Makari ambassador with respect. Ambassador Silversong, I remember you. You voted against our banishment, I did, and I have regretted the outcome ever since. Our terms are simple, Sarah said. The Council disbands. Each member species becomes free to govern itself. Military forces are reduced to defensive levels only. Most importantly, no species is ever again punished for being different. The chamber erupted again. Most delegates were shouting their refusal. Some were calling for total war against the Alliance, but a few, like Silversong, were nodding thoughtfully. The Prime Speaker raised his hands for silence. And if we refuse? Sarah's image was replaced by a new tactical display. It showed Alliance fleet positions throughout Council space. There were far more ships than anyone had imagined. If you refuse, Sarah's voice continued, we will continue liberating Council worlds until there are no Council worlds left. Your choice is simple. Dissolve the Council voluntarily, or watch it fall apart as every member species chooses freedom. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. For 6 hours, the Council debated. Some delegates wanted to fight. Others wanted to negotiate. A few wanted to surrender immediately. But as the hours passed, more reports came in. Alliance forces were advancing rapidly, and everywhere they went, local populations were defecting. Finally, the Zentari ambassador stood up. We need to make a decision. Do we fight or do we surrender? Before anyone could answer, Admiral Swiftstrike's face appeared on the screen again. Prime Speaker, I regret to inform you that the Mokari homeworld has declared independence from the Council. They are requesting Alliance protection. Silversong rose from her seat. The Mokari people have chosen freedom. We will not be the last. She walked out of the chamber, followed by several other delegates. Within minutes, reports were coming in of other species declaring independence. The Prime Speaker looked around at the emptying chamber. Admiral Swiftstrike, what is the status of our fleet? Sir, we could probably defeat the Alliance forces currently in our space, but intelligence reports suggest they have many more ships in reserve. And more concerning, our own crews are beginning to ask questions about why we are fighting species that were once our allies. The Zentari ambassador was still present, along with a few other hardline species. We can still fight, he insisted. We can still win. But the Prime Speaker was looking at the tactical display, watching as more and more Council worlds declared independence. Win what? He asked quietly. Win the right to rule over empty space? Sir, Swiftstrike said urgently, Alliance forces are approaching the capital system. They will be here within 6 hours. The Prime Speaker closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his skin had faded to a pale, defeated blue. Send a message to Emperor Chen, he said slowly. Tell her the Council is prepared to discuss terms. The Zentari ambassador stood up angrily. You cannot surrender the entire Council. I am not surrendering, the Prime Speaker replied. I am recognizing reality. The galaxy has changed, and we did not change with it. As Alliance ships entered the capital system, they found a very different reception than anyone expected. There was no desperate last battle, no final stand by Council forces. Instead, they found a government that was already collapsing from within, as species after species chose freedom over the old order. The age of the Great Chamber had once housed the Galactic Council. Now it buzzed with very different energy. Instead of rigid rows of seats arranged by species hierarchy, delegates from over 300 worlds sat in a great circle. They debated freely, laughed openly, and argued passionately about the future of their galaxy. Emperor Sarah Chen, now in her 80s but still sharp, watched from the observation gallery as the Alliance Parliament discussed trade agreements with newly independent worlds. Below her, a Vorthak crystal being was explaining energy-sharing technology to a group of former Council species who had never been allowed to learn such things. Hard to believe it has only been 5 years, said a voice beside. Her Sarah turned to see Admiral Torres, now even older than she was, but still wearing his military uniform with pride. His hair was completely white and he walked with a cane, but his eyes were as bright as ever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, Sarah replied. Sometimes it feels like we have been building this for centuries. Below them, the debate was getting heated. The representative from New Zentaria was arguing with a human delegate about mining rights in the Outer Rim. But they were arguing as equals, and both seemed to be enjoying the discussion. Do you ever miss the old days? Torres asked. When it was simpler? When we knew who our enemies were? Sarah smiled. The Council made things simple by making everything forbidden. We have made things complicated by making everything possible. A young woman approached them. She wore the blue uniform of an Alliance diplomatic officer, and her name tag read, Ambassador M. Chen. Sarah's granddaughter had inherited the family talent for dealing with difficult situations. Grandmother, Maya Chen said quietly, we have a situation that requires your attention. Sarah sighed. At her age, she had hoped to avoid situations that required her attention. What kind of situation? The remaining Council holdouts have sent a formal request for trade negotiations. They want to establish diplomatic relations with the Alliance. Torres laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a hill. The same Council that declared us extinct now wants to trade with us? Maya nodded. The message came from Prime Speaker Zeal for Truth. He was the patrol commander who first discovered us 5 years ago. Apparently, he has been elected to lead what is left of the Council government. Sarah was quiet for a moment. How many worlds are still in the Council? 14 systems. Mostly Althari worlds that were too proud to join us when their government collapsed. And now they are surrounded by Alliance space, cut off from most galactic trade routes. And their people are starting to ask uncomfortable questions about why they are living in isolation. Sarah looked down at the Parliament chamber. A Klaxi delegate was teaching a group of young beings how to use their new translation technology. In the corner, several species were working together on what looked like architectural plans for a new type of space station. This was what they had built. Not just an empire of conquest, but a community of cooperation. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked side by side. Technologies that had been hoarded by the Council elite were now shared freely among all Alliance members. What does Zeal for Truth want? Sarah asked. Maya consulted her tablet. Standard trade agreements. Technology exchanges. Possible membership negotiations for individual Althari worlds that want to join the Alliance. And what do our people think? The Parliament is divided. Some want to welcome the remaining Council species with open arms. Others think we should let them stay isolated until they collapse completely. Torres shifted his weight on his cane. What do you think, Sarah? Sarah watched a group of children playing in the observation area. They were from at least 6 different species, and they were all laughing at the same joke. None of them seemed to care about the old divisions that had once kept their peoples apart. I think, she said slowly, that we should give them the same choice we gave everyone else, freedom or isolation, but we should not force that choice on them. Maya nodded and made notes on her tablet. I will draft a response. Standard trade terms with provisions for individual worlds that want to join the Alliance separately from the Council government. Good. But Maya, yes, grandmother, make sure the terms are generous. We are not the Council. We do not punish people for the mistakes of their leaders. As Maya left to draft the diplomatic response, Sarah and Torres remained in the observation gallery. The Parliament session below was ending, and delegates were breaking up into smaller groups to continue their discussions. You know, Torres said thoughtfully, when we were banished, I thought our story was ending. Instead, it was just beginning, Sarah agreed. They watched as Ambassador Silversong approached a group of young Althari delegates who had come to observe the Parliament. The Makari diplomat was explaining how the Alliance government worked, how decisions were made through cooperation rather than domination. Do you think it will last? Torres asked. This alliance we have built? Sarah considered the question carefully. The Council lasted for 1,000 years by keeping everyone weak and divided. We have built something based on making everyone strong and united. I think our way has better long-term prospects. A new commotion in the chamber caught their attention. The Parliament's main screen was displaying an incoming transmission from the edge of Alliance space. The message was from Captain Morrison, now commanding the exploration vessel Enterprise. Emperor Chen. Morrison's voice came through clearly. I have something you need to see. The screen changed to show images from deep space. Strange ships hung in the void, clearly damaged and drifting, but the design was unlike anything anyone had seen before. We found them at the edge of the galaxy, Morrison explained. The ships appear to have come from outside our galaxy entirely. The survivors are in bad shape, but they managed to communicate one thing clearly. Sarah leaned forward. What did they say? They are refugees, Emperor. They said their galaxy was conquered by something they call the Devourers. They came here looking for help. The Parliament chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Just as the Alliance had finally brought peace to their own galaxy, a new threat was emerging from beyond the stars. Torres gripped his cane tighter. Well, that is going to complicate things. Sarah stood up slowly, her mind already working on the challenges ahead. Contact the fleet commanders. Have them prepare for possible long-range missions, and get our best scientists working on analyzing those alien ships. What about the Council's trade request? Maya asked, having returned to hear Morrison's report. Sarah looked at her granddaughter, then down at the Parliament full of beings who had learned to work together despite their differences. Process it immediately. If we are going to face a threat from outside the galaxy, we will need every ally we can get. As news of the refugee ships spread through the chamber, Sarah watched the Parliament's reaction. Instead of panic or fear, she saw determination. Species that had once been enemies were already discussing how to help the refugees. Scientists from a dozen worlds were volunteering to study the alien technology. This was the difference between the old galaxy and the new one. The Council would have seen the refugees as a threat to be contained or a problem to be ignored. The Alliance saw them as people to be helped and a challenge to be faced together. You know, Torres said quietly. I think we are about to find out just how strong this alliance really is. Sarah nodded. The Council kept peace by making sure no one was strong enough to threaten them. We have made everyone strong enough to defend themselves. Now we will see if that was wisdom or foolishness. The Parliament session resumed. But now the discussions had a new urgency. Trade agreements and mining rights seemed less important than preparing for whatever had driven an entire species to flee their home galaxy. As the debates continued, Sarah remained in the observation gallery, thinking about the long road that had brought them here. 55 years ago, humanity had been banished from the galaxy for being too different, too dangerous, too unwilling to conform. Now they led an alliance that spanned hundreds of worlds, and that alliance was preparing to face threats that the old Council could never have handled. The very qualities that had made humanity dangerous to the Council's order, their adaptability, their willingness to unite with other species, their refusal to accept limitations, had become the foundation of galactic civilization. The galaxy had learned something important about humans in those 55 years. They were indeed dangerous when cornered or threatened. But they were even more dangerous when they were given the freedom to build something better. And now, as unknown threats emerged from the darkness between galaxies, the rest of the universe was about to learn the same lesson. The age of human leadership had only just begun.